everyone, and thank you for joining. The session's theme is labeling products for sustainability. We will go over some of the trends circulating the topic and how the sustainability can affect companies. The focus of this session falls mostly on CPG companies, but all industries are subjected to this emerging topic. I'll start by presenting ourselves. I am Fernando, and I'm joined today by my colleague Lauren. We are both data analytics consultants for Thorogood, and I've included our emails and LinkedIn accounts, and I encourage you to reach out with any questions or if you just want to connect. We'll go over today over 5 main parts, aiming to talk about establishing a data platform to label our products with their environmental impact. But I'll begin by introducing you to our company, Thorogood. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a specialist data engineering, data science, and data visualization independent consultancy with over 30 years of experience delivering data solutions to leading enterprise organizations. The solutions we deliver are based on our founding principle, which is by always locking onto the business goals and then unleashing the technical and analytics capabilities we can in order to maximize the opportunities from those business objectives. We are a global company with offices in 5 countries, and our offices are spread globally in London, Philadelphia, Boston, Singapore, Bangalore, and São Paulo. We provide a full range of services to support business goals. This includes, but is not limited to, covering the end-to-end life cycle of any project from initial strategy and roadmap definitions, gathering requirements, and designing and implementing complex systems. We do this and success on it by not only maintaining solutions, but by empowering individuals and organizations they work for to use the tools that we create with training and support services. In terms of the technologies we work with, we aren't something firm, meaning we don't work with one specific technology. We do, however, work and partner with many of the key players in the market in order to provide our clients with the solution that best suits their needs. And as we will see later on, many of these partners are orientating themselves and driving towards sustainable businesses. So now that you know a little bit about us and what we do, let's dive in and talk about sustainability. Let's start by discussing COP26 and the global positioning on sustainability. As you may know, COP26 was the 26th annual United Nations Climate Change Conference hosted in Glasgow, Scotland, this past November. At this conference, United Nations officials gathered to discuss policies and actions to fight climate change. This conference is particularly important as it acts as a guide for businesses and governments on what they should do to help the environment and how to do it. The outcomes of the conference can be grouped into 4 main themes, including first, mitigation, which translates mainly to reducing emissions. Businesses and governments individuals must all be aware of the carbon they put into the atmosphere and make conscious decisions to reduce that impact. Following up, adaptation, which is helping those already impacted by climate change, which means the aid from developed to developing countries to more quickly adapt towards a sustainable model. Next, collaboration, which is working together to deliver even greater action. And finally, finance, which includes enabling countries to deliver on their climate goals, including funds collected from developed country members. In today's use case, we're going to highlight the themes of mitigation and collaboration mainly. So now that we talked about the main themes from COP26, let's now look at how things currently stand in the global view of environmental sustainability. First and foremost, there is growing interest in understanding climate change and a need to act. It's particularly prominent in younger generations, and many are dedicating their careers to take action against climate change. In addition, there is a need to report on how company activity impacts the environment. Key metrics such as CO2 emissions and energy and water usage are necessary. Publishing these numbers gives us a starting place to set goals from and lets us measure how much work needs to be done to reduce environmental impact. Going along with this idea, there is a need for businesses to report not only their current metrics, but also the plans they have and targets they set. These reports introduce a sense of accountability for those organizations to meet their targets. And lastly, sustainability storyline has opened more recently to consider not only the impact of the company on the environment, but also the impact of the environment and climate change on a company. This is a key part of risk assessment driven by strong governance, which is also vital to quality company reporting. This includes both the opportunities and challenges presented to supply chains, investments, and market disruptions. So The interest in climate change is already exerting its impact on businesses and reporting. But let's talk about how the positioning look like in the future. At first, there is a move towards international standards in order to achieve greater alignment and consistency in company reporting, as well as widening the scope for monitoring company reporting. Next, we've discussed in previous webcasts how one of the largest challenges with sustainability is a lack of standardization. So if you are interested, you can find these previous webcasts on our YouTube or website pages. COP26 talked about a move towards an international standard, which will keep everyone accountable to hitting their goals. And in the future, the standards will likely go from being voluntary to mandatory. And lastly, the acceptance that climate change can cause loss and damage widens the scope of impact and risk assessment, making the tools needed to do this even more important. The more businesses see climate change as a threat to their bottom line, the more incentive they have to fight. The next up, I'll talk about sustainable messaging and how the data appear on companies and products we see every day. There are two main types of sustainable messaging: company level and product level. Company level messaging can take form in a few ways. They can look like sustainability tab on a website, or an annual report to investors or the public on environmental and social governance. This type of messaging is becoming increasingly popular, like COP26 suggests. And annual reporting may even be required at some point in the future for companies. The other type of messaging we have is at the product level. Some examples are tags that label a product saying it's made with recycled materials, or a bottle labeled that it was made with 15% less plastic than its predecessor. Even a recycling symbol on a product is a message, telling the customer that the brand made sure that the product was the right material to be recycled. Here are some real-life examples of labels you might see, either at the store or, if you look closely enough, your own home. These labels are sending a message to the consumer. Their brand or organization has put in thought and effort to be environmentally conscious. An MSC label, for example, indicates responsible sourcing from forests. USDA organic labels mean that a food meets a certain standard for clean farming. You might also see an Energy Star label on your refrigerator or other appliances, meaning that it was designed to use energy more efficiently. Even buildings have labels, with rating systems recognizing the efficiency, cost saving, and carbon reducing actions taken in construction. As we've hinted before, there's much more to a label than just the text or logo printed on it. Information that can be found on a label can include brand, quantity, ingredients, and certifications, to name a few. But there is just as much information that isn't directly on the label that is taken into account into a purchasing decision. This kind of information is called here as off-label information and includes things as ethical issues and social reputation, consumer involvement, perceived effectiveness, and label knowledge. All of those translate to how does consumers perceive the impact of purchases and how are they seen by society. These also include peer pressure and how much the consumer knows about the current environmental state of the planet and how much does this person knows about sustainable labeling before going into the store to actually make the decision. Now you might be thinking, why does any of this matter for a company? And what value does this add to my business? Well, there are several reasons that sustainable messaging matters. The first is brand image. Right now, strong environmental messaging is seen as a benefit in supporting a particular brand, but putting out environmental policies, plans, and targets, as well as having labeling like a recycling symbol, is becoming increasingly common. As this behavior becomes more normalized, consumers' views will shift once most organizations are adopting environmental policies and actions. Consumers will notice which brands haven't joined the rest and may shift their purchasing behavior because of it. The next is growth. Research shows that 50% of growth in the consumer packaged goods industry came from sustainability marketed products, and products that have a sustainability label accounted for 16.6% of the market in 2018 and delivered nearly 114 billion in sales. The sheer size of this market and its growth trajectory should pique the interest of CPG companies. And last is pricing. The sustainable product market is not only growing, but studies also show that consumers are willing to pay more for sustainability marketed products and are actively changing their shopping behavior to do so. With such a strong will to buy sustainable products, it's a good move for CPG companies to focus on their sustainability messaging. But we also have to consider some challenges that go along with sustainable messaging. The biggest one we have is greenwashing. You may know this term, but if you don't, greenwashing is using disinformation to present a sustainable public image. As we discussed, consumers care enough about the environment to change their purchasing decisions. So businesses see value in presenting themselves sustainable. However, it is key to not just present your organization as environmentally conscious, but have the facts and take the actions to actually be environmentally conscious. There can be serious negative pushback from consumers if a company is discovered to be greenwashing. There are also tools available online that guide consumers in what to look for when finding truly sustainable products, and that also expose companies that say that products are sustainable but really aren't. Soon, we'll talk about establishing a data platform to eventually use in sustainable product messaging. This data is one of the ways that your organization can ensure that you have the facts to back up the claims you're making on your products and in your sustainability positioning overall. Now, I'll hand it over to Lauren.
All right, thank you, Fernando. So now we're going to talk through an example use case of how to use data in sustainable messaging. So climate change is an unprecedented problem. To solve it, we need a coordinated international effort at a larger scale than we've ever seen before. To begin to respond effectively, the key to tackling these challenges is embedded in organizational digital transformation. For organizations to rise to the challenge, they fundamentally must understand and quantify their impact on the environment and how to reverse or mitigate it. Successful implementation of data and AI solutions to tackle climate change will be determined by the extent to which organizations are able to collect, manage, analyze, and act upon their sustainability data in a timely fashion over the next few years. The first step for organizations will be identifying and collecting the required data. New challenges will require the use of new datasets that have never been analyzed or collected before. Data ingestion, storage, and processing will present a major initial hurdle. The nature and granularity of the datasets will need to include everything from carbon equivalent data, supplier FSC or PEFC certifications, how much water consumers use with the product, to even the type of truck used to ship a product. These types of datasets will suffice to provide an initial view as reporting and disclosure requirements are still being rolled out. However, as organizations become more sophisticated at tracking and analyzing their impact, they will need more accurate data at a much higher velocity. IoT devices combined with AI will enable greater pseudo real-time capabilities for tracking and responding at a greater scale. For example, tracking fuel consumption in real time or understanding and varying the power usage of an office building to save energy. Technology holds an incredible potential to power a sustainable transformation by increasing the productivity of systems while simultaneously lowering emissions, reducing waste, monitoring resources, collecting and harnessing vast amounts of data, and making breakthrough advances to drive the sustainability agenda further across all sectors. The immediate need will be the creation of holistic data platforms that are able to combine internal and external datasets across a variety of formats at a range of velocities. Once the architectures and data platforms are established, there will be a need for products and applications that can use this data to understand, analyze, and drive action. Thorogood has worked with world-leading organizations to help build out sustainability data platforms and the applications that drive action. Our aim as an organization, alongside our commitments to our own sustainability, is to work with world-leading organizations to continue to help them and others achieve their sustainability initiatives. So let's talk through some of the challenges we face when using data to label products. Firstly, our data will be coming from multiple sources. In this use case, internal data could be supply chain data that measures how much plastic is being used in a product's packaging. External data may be carbon emissions measured by a third-party carbon neutral certification provider. These datasets need to be combined into one platform, which presents other challenges. Datasets coming from multiple places are unlikely to be provided at the same level of granularity or frequency. So the next issue is how to handle that. How does missing data get filled in, and how does the data get aggregated to map mismatching granularities? Once we've figured out how to combine the datasets, we also need to consider data quality and accuracy. It is important to put data validation practices in place and run performance tests to make sure that the data we are receiving is accurate. This is a particularly important step as we need to make sure that, above all, the labels we put on our product are sending no false information. These are some of the challenges with the data itself, but there are also some things to consider when bringing data into a report or with the platform as a whole. The first is how to report or perform calculations. It's important to have a universal definition of your KPIs across the business. One KPI that would come up in this use case is kilograms of CO2 emitted in the life cycle of a product. It is also good to keep regulatory reporting in mind. These reports may end up being published to investors or the public each year, and there may be some standards that the reports need to meet. Last consideration we will discuss today is the flexibility of the data structures in your platform. Business is constantly evolving and growing, and your data platform needs to be able to accommodate those changes. For product labeling specifically, your business may have a change in supplier, an introduction of a new retailer, or start selling in a new market or channel. Make sure when establishing your data platform that it has the capability to handle these changes as easily as possible. So before you go and establish this platform, there are some requirements to consider when you're choosing the tools and data structures that will support your labeling goals. We've discussed how the climate crisis as a whole will need collaboration, but your data also needs to collaborate within your organization. Many platforms currently in place have data silos, individual data warehouses for each department or team that is not accessible to other parts of the business. This won't work for sustainable product labeling. This use case requires that different data from different types of the business be taken into one single source of truth data platform. This goes hand in hand with our next consideration, end-to-end visibility. Let's talk about an example in supply chain data. If your end goal is to label a product with its carbon footprint, it is necessary to see the data all the way from its source ingredients to the end usage by the consumer. Without visibility from end to end, the data is incomplete. And then we have external reference and value add. As we discussed earlier, external datasets will be brought in and provide more value and information that will eventually be used in the product label. And so now let's think about what a tool needs to incorporate these three ideas. First, you need scale. End-to-end visibility requires massive amounts of data, and so your tools need to be able to handle big data seamlessly and be able to model it together into a unified dataset. And second, you need auditability. As we've talked about, one of the most important parts of consumer-facing labels are that they are true. Therefore, your data processes need to allow for auditing of the data so that you are certain that your labels are accurate. So we've discussed challenges, considerations, and tool requirements. Now let's dive into how this data landscape might be structured. It starts with your data sources, where your internal data will give you the scale and details of your business. External sources of data will provide the potential sustainability impact through different data sets. This data will then be combined in the validation layer, which facilitates data collection, transformation, and calculation of environmental footprint results. In this validation layer, the data is checked for quality and accuracy. And lastly, the data is fed into the results layer, where it will be used for reporting. So this data landscape ultimately culminates in a dashboard that shows any and all information you'll need on your product label. It might look something like the dashboard shown, measuring total emissions broken down by scope. It may look completely different. What is shown in the dashboard is whatever best fits your business needs. For product labels, it may be emissions broken down by life cycle stage or tons of plastic broken down by product over a specific time span. These dashboards serve multiple purposes. The first is sharing results externally. This could be in an annual report to investors or putting the information on a product label. The second is sharing the results internally. Once you can see this data on environmental impact, these dashboards can be used as a tool to indicate which areas need the most improvement. They're a starting point to begin the conversations on where and how to reduce environmental impact. There's so much value in not only being able to show the public that you're thinking of the environment, but using the data to find the best course of action so that the next product label can show more sustainability initiative than the last. So let's wrap this up by talking about how Thorogood can help. It's pretty clear that we have to take action and take action quickly. So what I'm sharing now is our path to getting started to help you take action. This is an approach that we have used with a number of organizations. It starts by identifying the best opportunities. This will be different for each organization, but it's a starting point. Whether it's gearing up for regulatory reporting requirements, understanding your emissions, or creating a product label. The first step is highlighting and recognizing the challenges. We follow this with an initiation workshop, which I will go into more detail about in a second. But this will identify the first data and AI initiative to work on. From here, we start developing the solution to prove the value. Typically a 4 to 6 week engagement that will map out the different data sets needed and the velocity of that data to tackle the business goal, and then develop an end-to-end solution that can then be shared with the business to provide initial insight. Once the value is proved, we move into operationalization and delivery, scaling these solutions across markets and products to tackle sustainability challenges at a global level. So let's take a look at the initial workshop in more detail. It's a simple session to map out ideas and define action. We start by understanding the specific sustainability drivers for your organization, bring some solutions that we have created before, and then shortlist the potential candidates. Here we start delving into the candidates, mapping out the business goals and the data required to meet those goals, with the intention of creating some initial mock-ups to understand what the potential is for the solution. And then finally, we agree the next steps to turn that initial mapping into the proof of value. If this is of interest to you, please reach out following today's session and we will be delighted to help. And that brings us to the end of today's webcast. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions or would like to learn more, please do reach out. On behalf of Fernando and I, thank you very much for joining us today.